Cool.
Hi.
Hi.
It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Thank you for joining me for this conversation we're having on unlocking creative genius. This is the first of the Feel Tank Tuesday series. I'm going to try and do this weekly, and we'll feel out and unpack different topics and how they relate to our worlds and stuff. So
awesome.
Welcome. Thanks. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell anybody who's watching this a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Evelyn Schmelling. I also go by Hobo Diva, and I'm a psychic poet and teacher, mystic. I love to dance, and basically have been working with the artist's way kind of principles of writing every day and learning how to live more intuitively, I guess, for the last 10 or 11 years. And then I gave birth a few years ago, and that's really unlocked a lot of awareness over just letting go of bullshit of whatever things I thought I was trying to do that were more people pleasing than I really need to be doing for my soul and things like that. So the last couple of years has been straining out of a lot of unnecessary stuff in my life. And yeah, so I started committing more fully to doing my passions and bringing my typewriter out into the street every week and doing stuff that I know I need to do, even though it's really hard to force myself to do it, kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, me.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. We met in Ashland, Oregon, sitting outside of the Ashland Food Co-op. You were sitting there with your typewriter busking. You were maybe the third or fourth person I'd ever seen doing it. But you looked just so incredibly comfortable, just offering yourself like that. You look just so at home in and you can see the typewriter behind me. I've busked now with this typewriter. I got it last year. And so I was doing this myself, I guess 2 years ago now, lost an entire year. But it's not easy and it's not comfortable. And it's really it takes something. I think it takes a level of courage that I didn't fully appreciate that you must have had at the time. And then your book.
I was going to say courage and stupidity kind of ride side saddle with each other.
It is a little hard to separate them, right? Because walking into a lion's den is brave and stupid, right? And so you have to know what's stupid and what's not stupid, because there's many things that we shouldn't be doing that would take courage to do them.
Totally. And it's emotional sovereignty. You have the right to feel stupid, and then once you've actually done the stupid thing that actually doesn't endanger you like a lion's den, and actually is just really building you up to meet more challenges or whatever, you can look back and be like, okay, yeah, that was kind of courageous. All right, I didn't really know how courageous that was at the time. I discounted it or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I also want to say your book, I think you have multiple books now, right? But the book that I'm talking about is the one that you put out, I guess, early last year. And I want you to know that book actually inspired me, not what you wrote, but the fact that you put it together and the form that it took, because there's typos that you just, hand fixed. And, there's all kinds of, not fine art, you've got your own drawings, and it's your own sketches, your own personality, your own art is the book. And it's weird and it's yummy, and it's there's no perfection in it anywhere. And I've never seen anything like it before. And it was so inspiring, because I'm not a fine artist. I make lots of typos. I'm not good at, drawing whatever. And I'm not saying anything about your drawing. You may be drawing the figures that you do completely with a master's in art, and you're doing that on purpose. But it doesn't look polished, and I don't know how to make things look polished. So it gave me permission to just be my raw self and make something that I like, regardless of what other people might think of it. So like, I feel like you have unlocked creative genius, and it's one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you about this. So.
Oh,
yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm a big fan of, I know a lot of people that have made some really cool like art that like in my family and, you know, in my friendship groups that I like, why isn't this on YouTube? Like, da 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 da. They're just kind of like, oh, there's this little mistake or there's that mistake. And I'm like, make mistakes. Like, why are we trying to create perfect pieces of art and putting it out there so that people can like then feel like they will never be able to create pieces of art to put out there? Like, that's not the standard that we're trying to create in this world. Like, we want to make people feel like it's possible, you know? And so, yeah, I feel like I identify as having I don't want to say, I feel like I haven't been, I feel like I have special needs. Like, I'm a sensitive person and I have always been kind of weird and didn't fit in this way. And like, my drawings have always been kind of, like you're saying, they don't look like fine art. And I'm like, right. Like, I feel like when I've tried to draw my whole life, it's always kind of looked, you know, bad, I guess, by like standards of whatever fancy people. And like, even when I was in college or whatever, like, I was like, can we just not have the fancy talk? Like, why are we trying to create like a elitist cool club that like nobody can ever reach, like a standard basically that's like even not attainable by us, you know? Like, this is completely stupid. And so, yeah, that's a big part of what I'm trying to do in the world, is just like unlock creative genius. Or I feel like creative genius is like embracing your full authenticity, and that's like something free that you can do. Like I believe we were all born with this, and then we were programmed by society to like try to basically just criticize ourselves to the point where we feel so heavy that we can't even make moves on any level, kind of thing, because we're just like so mean to ourselves in our head. And it's like, when in reality, like, we are made to, yeah, be exactly who we are and make the weird, ugly things that we do, and like make all the stupid faces that we make, and you know. So I don't know. It just kind of, I don't know what a world looks like that where everybody's just kind of openly making mistakes all the time, and how that really works. But I do think that it would be a more free space for people to actually express themselves. Oh,
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I have so much that just came up when you were just trying to listen and not think about what I was going to say. But so I'm still pretty new at this, you know, this whole like trying to host things like this. But a few things. One, jazz comes to mind, right? So,
yes.
You know, a whole lot of what jazz is playing wrong notes and making them sound amazing, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's, you know, right? So like it's an art form. And if people only played like the way you're supposed to, whatever that is, we wouldn't have jazz, right? And then I was thinking about like Salvador Dali. And I was thinking about like, what would have happened in the world if people just kept telling him to be realistic, you know? Like what kind of like education would we end up having had that kind of art not been made? So like, of course, everybody should have the permission inside of themselves to make whatever wants to come out of them, because it's inspiring. Even if what the product isn't necessarily inspiring, the process that people go through is inspiring. By the way, your book, I ended up giving away very quickly. I never actually read it. So there was somebody came over and was having a really hard time, and I knew they needed the download of just be authentic and be yourself. So I gave them your book. So
I love
I don't even remember who it was.
Like my friend last night, she's like, my friend said she loved my shirt, and so I just like took it off, and it's like, here, take it. And the other day she texted me like, I'm wearing the monkey shirt, and I was like, that's awesome. Like,
That's great.
I love that. I think you're right. I think it's interesting that we have all these idols from the past that are very free thinkers, and that we like live in a world that's very anti-free thinking. Like I worked in education, and I feel like it's always like, yes, teach the kids, this is for the kids, and we're trying to expand their minds, while like the structure of education is like a prison that's very like don't listen to your intuition, no, sit down, Timmy, sit down, you know. And it's like to me, we're studying like Leonardo da Vinci and Salvador Dali, and you know, it's like, look at these people and like these pioneers that basically were breaking the rules all the time, and like, and simultaneously we're like we don't know how to support that, because we're so the fear has gotten so like high in our society now that we're unable to like, I don't know, we're scared. It's like how you were saying about even hosting this podcast, you know, it's like being a teacher or being a person that's like in charge, quote unquote, is so scary, because there's so much unknown, and people are like, what do I do? What's you know, whatever. The kids are unlocking their creative genius.
Right.
I don't know how to respond, you know.
Well, it's very old paradigm, new paradigm, right? Old paradigm is power over, there's a right way of doing things, and there's some authority that knows what that is. You know, new paradigm is authenticity and collaboration and, you know, just really fully expressing ourselves. And I just got chills. Yeah. So, I mean, you're just a very new paradigm thinker. And I think it's lovely that you are raising a child, because that child will grow up knowing that there isn't a right way of doing anything, you know, creatively. And so hopefully her, right? Hopefully her, she'll never get blocked. Hopefully she won't ever have to unlock her creative genius, because it won't get locked up. It won't be kept from her. You know, it's so weird, right? That we, you know, when we're really little, like some of my earliest memories are sitting in my parents' half unfinished basement when with Play-Doh. We only had 3 colors of Play-Doh back in the day, right? So I would be mixing the colors of Play-Doh, and like, you know, I would just like line up all of the purples and all of the browns that I had made. And there was something about mixing those colors that was amazing. But then when I got into school and we were playing with Play-Doh and I was doing that, I was told I was using Play-Doh wrong, because I was like ruining it for everybody else, because you couldn't put the blue back into the blue. You know what I mean? Like I was making new colors that we didn't have a container for.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Which is like such a good metaphor.
Yeah. So
what do we do? Like, what do we do with these new colors? It's like,
exactly.
That's diversity.
There's no place in the world for them, right? Because they're like, and it's maybe kind of ugly, and it's maybe like not what I meant to do, but like, anyway. But But yeah, but she's going to grow up in a world where like there's plenty of containers for whatever she makes, because why wouldn't there be? You know?
Right. It's chaos magic, which is kind of overwhelming at times, but essentially is always where we've been living, even when we like think we're in a box that's like a safe container, that's like our house, or, you know, whatever, our jobs, or, you know, whatever. You're like, I'm safe, I'm in a relationship. And then you're like, you know, whatever, something inevitably always happens, and you're like, oh crap, chaos is everywhere. And it's like, well, if you live in chaos and trust the chaos, just carte blanche, then you're never gonna, well, not that you're not gonna ever be overwhelmed, because being a human is just overwhelming. I think feelings can really just kind of take over. But like, I think it's a little bit easier to roll with the punches, ride the waves, when you just like are always aware that that's just what life is, and you know, there is no like false security kind of thing. But
I remind myself often that we are hurtling through space around a big ball of fire. Like that really helps, right? Because it's like everything that's not chaotic is only not chaotic for right now, because we're hurtling through space. We are in space. You know, like we're in space. Like we're in space. You know, this looks like a nice normal neighborhood, but it's just that this particular piece of space hasn't gotten like hit by an asteroid lately, you know? So
we can't actually see the space all the time, but it's there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it blends in the same way that a goldfish in a tank doesn't have any idea what the ocean is like. You know, we're in our own little tanks and our own little bubbles, and like we can't see space, because the only way you can see space is from the perspective of outside of where we are. You know,
that reminds me of when I had set up my poem shop in like Southern California, and this guy came up and he didn't want a poem or anything. He was just like, you really need to go into the schools and teach kids this. And I was like, what do you mean, like how to type poems? And he was like, no, that like you need to teach them that there isn't like a wall around their city that they can't leave. Like people think that when they're living somewhere that like you just stay in that town, you stay in that city, like even though we feel like we live in a world that's very like expansive, everybody's traveling, yada yada yada. There's a lot of fear around like even though you know you're a goldfish in a tank and you can't perceive the ocean, like you know the ocean's there on some level as a human, but you're kind of like, I don't need to really go, I could just stay in this tank or whatever. And I'm like, I think that's a huge part of unlocking creative genius, because my friend just recently learned about the hero's journey, and like each time you leave your town, even if you're just leaving for a day trip, it's like a hero's journey. And the only way for you to really like get supernatural aid or like figure out your powers or any of that stuff is to actually like go into the unknown and like leave your comfort zone and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that's a huge part of it too.
Yeah, totally. And I can attest that from my own personal like life. You know, I was 42 when I gave up my apartment and, you know, moved into my car and started just traveling. You know, I left New Jersey at the end of 2014, and I've been across the country 8 times now. And I lived out of my car for a few of those years. And I upgraded to like the SUV that I could sleep in really comfortably, because I wanted to go type poems out of the back of my SUV, right? In San Diego. Yeah.
You're like, this is going to be a thing. I'm going to keep doing this. And I want to do it in a way that's actually more sustainable, because that's how committed I am to like being on my hero's journey. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And then of course there was a pandemic, but now we have Zoom, because we wouldn't have had Zoom had there not been a pandemic. We had it, I guess, but like we didn't have it, you know? It's
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So now we can do this. Yeah. It's so weird how things turn out. But tell me more about chaos magic, because I call it being in the flow, which I think is the same thing. I think it's when you allow yourself to be in the flow, there is that magic. Is that what you mean?
Kind of, huh? Yeah, I do think like people say the flow, and I used to think that was like, oh yeah, you're just going with the flow. And then I realized like, oh no, it's like a combination of like doing the work so that you're strong enough to also like, you know, be in the flow without being taken over by the flow.
Yes.
Chaos magic, I guess, is similar to that. I started saying chaos magic because like I worked in places and interacted with people that like have a lot of magical trash around them. You know, like you look at it and you're like, oh, that's kind of like put together with strings, and like you don't always like wash your hands, you know, like there's like things that are going on that are like, oh, and then you're like getting peaches from over here. It's like a farm or like a garden or something, right? Where it's like, okay, you don't even water that plant, but it kind of grows. And then like over here, somebody's bringing in this and this, and like everything's coming from all over the place. And like, it looks kind of messy, and like you judge it like, oh, that's not productive. But then oddly, it's very successful and like works really well. And so like, it's kind of like being in the flow, but it's also kind of just like acknowledging that like, yeah, it's, I don't know. Oh, I love it. So yeah, I guess it's like somebody just drove by right now and it's all like, yay, I have a little this introduction. And I'm like, right, that's chaos magic. That is the flow. I guess it is the same thing. Maybe. It's like you can't really necessarily understand it or like organize it or even really figure it out. And yet like everything works when you stop trying to control it. So yeah.
Yeah, right? Especially trying to control it because of fear. Trying to control things because of fear, I think, shuts down the magic. Yeah.
Right, because it can be very overwhelming. Like, to me, like when I hear being in the flow, it sounds very like peaceful and you know, like, oh, like a melody, you know. And I think that for me, it gets confusing in spiritual communities and stuff, because a lot of the way that people speak is very, it all sounds very nice, right? Like high vibes and like beautiful. And then you're in the world and it doesn't always feel like that. And so like chaos magic to me is a more like celebration of reality mixed with like acknowledging like the magic of the flow, you know, I guess. So it's like, you know, because you go, yeah, essentially.
I like it. Yeah, I like it. I have more questions. Let me think of the order to put them in. 2 questions. One, I don't know if we ever talked about this before, but I sort of have this vision of trash pirate camps, and this whole movement of trash pirate camps where people are reclaiming land that other people aren't using, and they are taking things, items that people aren't using, and they're repurposing them into useful things and into art. And they're using it as a place to teach chaos magic and teach the littles that they don't have to live in the old paradigm, and to teach, you know, innovation and whatever, and taking the old paradigm stuff and turning it into new paradigm art. And so I guess my question is, if that kind of camp existed, how would you want to run something like that? Would you just want to be part of it? Like, how would that inspire you?
So the part about that is I feel like I love that idea, and I feel like I am trying to create that in my own life. I've like started talking about this like secret society of authenticity, SSA, ass backwards, like trash magic, just saying trash magic all the time, and people are just kind of like, yeah. And even talking about chaos magic, there's like a level of it where you're just kind of like, yeah, I'm talking about this right now, and it's like kind of illegal feeling, you know, but at the same time, like whatever, like I'm renting from this person on this land and like figuring out how to like turn it into, you know, like a pirate camp, almost like you're talking about. And I'm just kind of like, we're out here doing this right now, and yeah, I might pay you rent right now, but like who knows, basically I'm squatting, I live in a shed, like, you know, it's nothing's legal about this, okay? But I do have a lease, you know, so I'm like very inspired and excited about what you're talking about, because I feel like it's so necessary. And I think that the reason why it feels kind of like, you know, the other side of the coin of excited is scared or nervous. You know, a lot of my anxiety, I think, comes up because I'm just straight up excited, but I don't know how it will feel, kind of thing. I feel like it feels like, oh, we're mixing up the pot on like a level that's bigger than I have allowed myself to really believe that I was doing, I guess. I don't know. You know, it's like, whatever, I'm just out here on my typewriter, not a thing or whatever. And then you start having these conversations and saying things that you're like, that was kind of an intense thing to say, but I said it. Okay, moving on to the next thing. But then you say something like that, like a trash pirate camp, and I'm like, yeah, that's really committing to something, and that sounds really awesome, and that's actually what's necessary in order for us to really like establish real and lasting change, you know? Because like whatever, what is it? It feels radical. That's the word. It feels like radical and like almost anarchistic, but
it is.
It's not, because really there's just like, I mean, it is because of the world we live in.
Yes.
But also there's just so much land that's straight up not getting used. Like you're saying, like people just have space that's not being used. And like, there's so much trash that could be turned into magic if it were actually being utilized, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to be, I mean, that's my plan, is to continue to be creating.
That's awesome.
Essentially legit pirate stuff. Hi.
That's awesome.
Where are you right now?
I'm in New Jersey. I am back to where I started 7 years ago. Very close to where I started out, very close to where I grew up. A friend had an extra house for me to use. So I am in this extra house filled with stuff that is not mine and that he doesn't know what to do with. So it belonged to a relative of his. So
Case in
yeah.
point right there.
Exactly. Yeah. And we've had many discussions about like what to do with the physical things that like really meant something to somebody else, but don't mean anything to him, you know? And so it's
Right. The
a
attachment.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot. But yeah. I guess I want to talk a little bit about my experience with unlocking creative genius.
Yeah.
Because so November 2019, I got the typewriter that's behind me and I started doing the whole busking thing. And I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was 25. Actually, reading learning disability, not otherwise specified, but you know, and I really had this story that I couldn't ever busk that way because I wasn't going to be able to correct my typos. And, you know, I don't know, I guess your book really gave me a lot of permission in a way to like, you know, because I was fine busking and making typos, you know, it's like the person watching me, if I make a mistake, I make a mistake. But taking, are you there?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. I got in my head for a second. But taking the poems then and then doing something with them, like that idea happened at the same time I got your book. So it was like I was sitting with these, like I had like typed like 300 poems that I had taken pictures of with my phone because I'd given them to people. And so I didn't have the originals. And so I'm sitting with them. They're terrible pictures. Like there's lots of typos. Some of the lines in there were like just to fill up space. They weren't like really particularly helpful to the poem, whatever. And so I sat with it and I'm like, well, you know, I was trying to get somebody to like do a digital thing for me where I was going to stitch together all of this stuff and I couldn't do it. And so I rolled myself a joint and I went and sat on the balcony and I'm looking at the mountain because I was in Ashland and it's like living in a picture there. And I'm sitting on the balcony and I'm smoking this joint and I'm like, okay, I'm like, well, nobody's showing up in the flow to take care of this stuff for me. You know, nobody is showing up in the magic field to like do this for me. How can I do it? What do I know? Like, what is my skill set? How could I do this if I didn't think there was a right way of doing it? And what I came up with was I know how to use a glue stick. Like, honestly, like that was the answer, was I know how to use a glue stick and I have scissors. So I took my good fabric scissors because those were the scissors I had. And I started cutting apart. I had the poems printed out and I started cutting them apart and then laying them out and trying to make new poems out of them and figuring it out. And like, you know, I got other scraps from people gave me other scrapbooking stuff. And I just started collecting like, you know, I call it collage alchemy, where you take different little pieces of things and put it all together and it makes something like new and beautiful that like the sum bigger than the sum of the parts. So I made this book I called Downloads from the Universe, Volume 1. And it was just scrapbooked. It was 36 pages. And then trying to get it printed was a whole nother adventure. But now it's currently at the printer right now because I finished Volume 2 like last week. And so it's 63 pages, I think, total, including the cover, and the whole thing is scrapbooked. The copyright page is scrapbooked, you know, everything is scrapbooked. And there's like glue marks and the edges aren't straight. Nothing is straight. The pages aren't straight. Like it's all very weird and very me. And nobody could have made this but me. Like my eye made it, you know what I mean? And my guidance the entire time was to make something I liked, you know? And I had to redo the front cover because the front cover was something that I had made when I wasn't in that mantra yet. I was trying to figure out the right way of doing it. And it was not good because I didn't like it, you know? And it's like, I have now made something that I like, whether or not anybody else likes it. Hi there. Whether or not you having a good lunch? But,
I think that's really an important distinction that you just made. That is
that we all battle with, even when we continue to try, like, do things the way we like, but then we go back to like, but there's the way that's the right way to do it or whatever. And I think that that's cool that you kind of caught yourself on the cover with that. Like, wait a second, this isn't actually me. It's just what I thought would look the best for some random audience member that I'm imagining hates my style or whatever. Yeah.
I didn't even think that's what would look the best. I just thought it was the right way of doing it. Like I had this idea in my mind of like, this is the right way to do it. And it didn't work. The new cover is way better. So yeah, it's fun stuff. I'm so glad we're getting to do this. I'm so glad you joined me.
Me too. I'm really glad that you invited me and reached out and just like suggested it, because it feels so good to be having this conversation. It's something that, I don't know, I think that we all go through these creative conversations alone a lot because we're like, you know, crazy, all of us humans, and we're like thinking so much all the time. And it's nice to talk to an outside person about it and realize that I'm not alone. And like, I love that name for your book too, by the way, Downloads from the Universe. That's a really good name.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's what my busking sign said. It said Downloads from the Universe.
And I love it.
And live typewriter readings. That's what I was doing. I would make like good eye contact with people and just type what was there. It was easier for me than trying to like write poetry. I've been writing poetry since I was 13, but like it's different when you have like a sign that says poetry booth and you're trying to generate a poem than when you're giving somebody a live typewriter reading that is a poem, kind of, but it's like it's also just the download. You know, like we make good eye contact and then I see what goes across people's faces and I sort of have an idea of what they just moved through in that. And then I can just type something that speaks to it. So.
Yeah, essentially, like that's what I am doing as well. And people make a judgment based on the poetry. Like I'll say it says psychic poem shop and they're like, I don't really like poetry. And I'm like, yeah. Like my friend's mom was like, I just want the poet to get to the point already or whatever. And I'm like, right, I'm not like a poet in that way that's like all flowery, like Lord Byron or something. It's like rhyming to the point where it's like, what are we even saying here? Okay. Like, I don't even understand what the point of this 6-page long poem is, but like, it is more of a reading. Yeah. That's a nicer wording for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's people get really nervous around the idea of poetry too.
Yeah, and you know, it's something like Toad the Wet Sprocket. I don't know if you know them. The song "Walk on the Ocean." The line is "Walk on the ocean, step on the stones. Something becomes water, bone." I don't remember what it is, but the 4 lines, they don't mean anything. And what Glenn Phillips, the lead singer, says about it, he's like it's bad songwriting. He's like, it sounds poetic, but it's meaningless. It's just, you know, he just threw words together. And I think that's a lot of the street poetry that you get is like that, where people are just putting something together that sounds poetic, but they've like typed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of poems and there's nothing new to say. So I think it's more valuable. I mean, and it just came up in my memories, actually. You wrote me a poem. I don't remember what it was about, but yeah. Yeah, but that's why I thought of you, actually, is because it came up on my memories. So
cool.
Yeah
I think there's a difference between like what you're saying, kind of trying to like regurgitate a poem or, you know, whatever, just like come up with a quote unquote poem versus like what you're talking about and what we both do, where we're actually like taking the time to be present, essentially. I mean, like being psychic or being like doing a reading, it sounds so to many people, even myself, sounds kind of like elitist too or something, but actually it's really just being present and like looking at something like you're saying and like watching what goes through the eyes and trusting what comes up inside of you. And there's no way for it to feel whatever, like there's no way for it to feel starchy, like what you're saying poetry can sometimes feel like, because it's like completely in the moment and authentic. So you're just there
writing down what it is that you're actually like feeling and seeing. And so that's what makes it, I think that's what makes it so powerful and why people respond to it a lot.
Yeah, totally. And I think that presence is the thing that really is the kind of litmus test for creative genius. It's like if you don't have that kind of presence, you're not in that creative genius field. You're in the thinking part of it, you know?
Totally. Yeah, you're in the programming of society kind of part of it. That's actually like a boner killer for creativity.
Right? Yeah, totally.
Where you're like, okay, because I feel like I've always hated poetry because I kind of thought I couldn't do it. You know, like I was almost put into special education in first grade. Like I wasn't told that I was dyslexic. I was just kind of like couldn't read and all this stuff. And so I have this like insecurity inside of myself around all these things, even though whatever, doesn't matter how many years stack on. But that's like the old paradigm, like what you're saying, this idea of like, this is a good poet, or like, this is what real poetry is. And then even like the librarian in our county was saying that, you know, like the poet laureate comes and teaches this poetry lesson with the kids and is like telling them they're doing it wrong, you know? And it's like, she's like, that's why I do like how you're just kind of like allowing people and poetry to be whatever it is or whatever. Cause I've been going to the library too. And I'm like, right. It's not really that cool how so many English teachers and so many like fancy wordsmith people tell kids and younger people and students that they're basically doing it wrong. Nope, you're analyzing that poem wrong. That's not what the poem means. It's
Right.
like, that's just, trying to stay in that old world thinking. It's really sad.
Yeah, and it blocks creative genius, you know?
Exactly. That's what I was, that loops it back to that. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to know if your story about like what you were saying with the difficulty reading and all that stuff, if that ever gets in the way of your creative genius and what you do to clear it.
Oh, that's a good question.
But if you want to finish chewing, I can say something else. Because it happens to me. Like I have to clear it sometimes too.
Like, yes.
Say it again. You just broke up a little bit and I was talking over you.
I mean, I was just at my friend. Can you hear me?
I can. Your video's frozen. There you go. No, it's better. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say that the story of I'm stupid, thinking that I don't know anything in a way that's like detrimental to my sense of self-worth and self-esteem and stuff like that. And I guess like I clear it in any way that like I go take a drive, I go hang out in the forest, I go jump in a river, I go like just dance and shake my body and shake my bones all over like there's all sorts of things that I feel like just heal all those inner critic weird things, or call a friend, or you know, all the kind of just releasing the anxiety story stuff that we kind of build up as strategies in our life. I've been actually, I guess, practicing more like just saying it out loud too, because I was at my friend's house and I was doing something with these plants to harvest the seeds, and I was like taking them apart and they were really prickly and it was really painful, but I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do because all the little parts of the plant are in the seed, like each of the little seeds. And she's like, oh no, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to do that. You can just plant the whole thing. You don't have to take them each apart. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm doing something stupid. I didn't realize that I was wasting my time, blah, 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 which is part of that story of like, I don't know how to harvest plants because I don't know how to read, because I don't know how to like do things that smart people know how to do. You know, like just the litany of like it feeding all the things that require intelligence. And she was just like, well, if you want to feel stupid, you can feel free to feel stupid, you know, kind of thing. And I was like, oh, cool. Okay, thanks. Like, so sometimes it's helpful to like even just say it out loud, you know, like, oh, I feel stupid right now. Or, you know, like, oh God, I don't know how to do this. Or like making art and it's like crafting or whatever. doesn't have to diminish it, but like, you're like, I don't know how to paint, or, you know, and you're just like, say it out loud that you're thinking that it's ugly, or thinking that, and that kind of, I think, helps to like make the story less powerful because it's not trapped in your head. So I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah. When you're in that state, do you feel like it takes courage to show up and be your authentic self? Like,
what did you say?
When you're kind of like in that state, like where you're like kind of stuck in that story, do you feel like it takes courage to show up as your authentic self?
Yeah, it feels kind of like, it feels like, oh, I could just keep that to myself. It's kind of like the story comes up in my head, and then it almost feels like you're at the edge of a cliff, like the inside of your head, and like, and it's like either I jump off the cliff or I die, because like some part of me dies if I don't, like, you know, actually build community and interconnectedness through being honest about what I'm going through. Because at this point, I feel like it's really actually rude to other people if I at all try to like pretend like I'm in some cool club or some elitist thing, especially in like creative spaces or like spaces of learning or da 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 da, because so many people are like, oh yeah. Oh right. Usually when I do this, or, you know, even if they've only done something one time, they're like, okay, I did it once, so I can just, you know, fake it till I make it kind of thing, which, you know, whatever. But yeah, so like the fear comes up of like, oh crap, I don't know how to do this, or like, oh, I'm bad at this, or I think that I'm bad at this, or whatever. And then like the feeling or like urge to like kind of push it down is kind of like a death of like, yeah, a moment of courage that I could have, you know, let some sweat escape from my skin being around people and admitting something that feels really awkward and vulnerable. Like, oh, I feel stupid, or, oh, I don't know how to do this, or what I made is ugly, or, you know, whatever. And like, yeah, my skin sweats every time. Doesn't matter how many times I do it. I get my armpits sometimes stink depending on how long I keep it under wraps. You know, it actually is worse the longer I like try to trick. And pretend, you know. But then like, but still, even if it's like in an instant deciding to be courageous and like share the truth of like, oh crap, like I feel weird and awkward and ugly and all the things are coming up like they always do. Especially in creative spaces, because it's like it requires so much spontaneity, and you're like have to just continually, and spontaneity is just continuing to let go, right? Like in every moment, you're just like, but I'm attached to like, I thought I did something good just then. Oh no, now I'm like worried. I don't know what's the next thing to do, but like, can I just leave this paper blank with just that little like perfect half circle forever? No, I should add something else. Oh, now that's ugly. You know, it's like a constant, like, that's beautiful. That's ugly. That's beautiful. That's ugly. That's, you know.
And it's beautiful, but it's ugly.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So yeah, it does feel courageous to share it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But it comes out as like sweat and like, just nervous.
I want you to know that you don't show up in any way like anybody would ever know that you feel those ways inside. Like, unless you tell people, like, which is one of the really valuable things about the way that you show up, is because you do tell people, like, you know, what's below the surface. Because all I see is a prolific, proficient, published author, right? That has written how many thousands of poems, you know? I mean, and you wrote your books. Like, I can't do that. You know, I'm going to typewrite the next book, but I already know that it's going to be lines that are cut badly. And it's going to be collage alchemy, because I can't get through 3 sentences without a typo.
Collage alchemy is such a good word too. I love that as well. You're right. My friend was saying that people are like, oh, you look so perfect, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, I feel stupid all the time. And I'm like, I couldn't tell from your Instagram though. And she's like, that's business. And I was like, right. But like, how do we show up and share so that people don't feel like they need us or you specifically to be this like savior person? Because that puts us in a drama triangle situation where it's like, I'm a victim, you're my hero, that person's the villain. Okay, cool. You know, and it's like,
Yeah.
So I think that that's an awkward thing for me. Like what you're saying, like people have told me that a lot. They're like, I couldn't tell that you're nervous. And I was like, I feel really nervous all the time. But for some reason, like that's not how I represent. And so I'm constantly feeling, whatever weird about it. Like even recently I got on an open mic in this forest party thing in Oakland. And I like said this awkward joke and kind of settled some tension and then like sang this song. And I got off the mic and then I just started, the inner critic started coming in super hardcore. It was just like, okay, now like nobody wants you to be here now. Like you need to just like, your baby's making too much noise. Like that was stupid. Like all those things that you said, why did you have to go on for so long though? Like you went on for too long. And so I walked away. Oh, crying helps too with this part, with like the revealing and like unlocking your creativity, right? Because it's like as soon as you reach the point where I'm walking away and I'm like, I don't even know why I'm here. Like, why did I even come? Like, here I am with my baby. This is the stupidest thing I've ever done. The tears just start coming, streaming down my face, and I'm just like crying. And then like somebody gave me the advice of like, when you walk away from a space that you feel those things of like that insecurity comes up or whatever, you feel othered by yourself or by other people. It's really powerful to like give yourself at least one chance to just return, go back at least one time after like, you leave and you feel like a freak show or whatever. And then you just walk back and like see how it goes. And like you're saying, like I walk back and be like, that was a great song. I'm like, oh, you're just saying that. Okay. Da, da, da. Another person. Oh, that was nice. Like, okay. Like, I'm glad that I came back, like I'm glad that I allowed people to actually respond, because sometimes we fear the rejection or the critics so much that we don't even allow people to say anything. And then surprisingly, people are like, yes, I like it. And you're like, oh, it's just me that hates myself. Okay, good. As long as it's clear.
Yeah. Well, it's also, people on top of appreciating whatever it is that you're sharing, appreciate how you do it. Right. It's like, there's this woman I follow on some social media that's always doing the aerial silks. And she's not like the most graceful at it. She's been doing it for years and years, but she's not the most graceful at it. But I love watching her more than anybody else because I love seeing what not graceful looks like. Right. Like it makes me, because then I don't know, give me more permission to like just show up and not have to worry about how graceful I am. Right. And to like not worry how perfectly timed my shares are or whether or not I'm backlit or whatever. I can just do what I need to do and not worry too much about the exacting, detail about the right way of doing it. So I always, anytime anybody comes like off an open mic or something, that the way they showed up inspired me, their courage inspired me, their willingness to be imperfect and not apologize for it. Like I always go out of my way to acknowledge people doing that, because when we can show up imperfectly and not apologize for ourselves, it's really powerful. Like that's so magical. So
it's true. And I think that even though I identify as a free thinker and I do understand that I'm kind of like part of this new paradigm shift, I think that there's still this part of me that's reprogramming for myself where like, secretly I just kind of wish that I could be like that polished thing though. You know what I mean? Where you're like,
I do very much.
I love watching like the
I do very, very much. It'd be a fuck ton easier, right? If like if I fit into the mold, my life would be so much easier, but much less inspiring. Yes. I do get it.
Okay. And that's the chaos magic, right? That's the reality of like, yes, you can sell your soul and like make an art that sells or whatever. Like if that's really what you want to do with your life, okay, that's a way to live for sure. But like if you really want to be inspired by your life and like present for it and scared to life so that you're actually like feeling an aliveness, which is like way more cool and exciting, and like supernatural aid comes in, as look at you, you're like, my friend just let me live in his house. I remember you found a house in New Mexico to like do, just openly admitting on Craigslist that you needed a space and like got to live in a magical palace space in New Mexico. It's like
a year ago this week. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
somebody just opened up their Airbnb to me so I could unpack after the wildfires. Yeah.
Right.
It was a mess.
And it's like,
Yeah.
that's the magic that you get. Like, it's different than like the success story of the like perfectly designed sticker collection that you created that like looks like impossible to do. And so then you feel like I could never do it. But at the same time, it's like, in many ways, I feel like I don't think anything's superior to anything else, but I think there's definitely like, I think the world is shifting to a more authentic vibe for sure. And I think that like what you're saying about watching the aerial silks, like the awkward aerial silk artist versus like watching the perfect aerial silk artist, I think there's like gonna be continue to be more of a movement towards, I think, more videos like that becoming more popular, where it's like, oh, I want to see the dancer that actually shows me that I could do it too.
That's relatable, right?
Yeah,
that I can relate
relatable.
to.
Yeah,
Totally.
exactly.
Well, there's a bunch of stuff there. One, we're entering a time of the new Renaissance for sure. You know, the amount of art that's being produced while people have the time and you know, there's nothing else to do other than make art right now. Like, what else are we going to be doing with this time, right? So there's that, but also as tech becomes more ubiquitous and it's easier to, like, you know, right now you can have, I mean, this video is going on YouTube, you know, and I just made it this new channel, and as this ties into something I was going to say before, actually, when we were talking about like the right way of doing things, you know, like the men who wrote the poetry that got published way back when, you know, the men who made the art that got, you know, put up in galleries way back when. The reasons that there was like those kinds of art standards was because there were so few channels to put it out, right? So as there become more channels to put it out, the standards have vanished. There's no more any standards, and it's just now what we've decided as a society we think is art and what is acceptable in life. And we're trying to normalize that everything authentic is right. You know, whatever your authentic, you know, creative genius is the right way to be. Yeah. Are you getting to the end?
Right, and I think that that's also tied into the like. Oh, go ahead.
I was just asking you. I wanted to be respectful of the fact that you've got a kid with you and seeing if you're. Oh, we lost your video. Just see it's back.
Yeah.
Just seeing if we should wrap it up is the question.
Totally. I think that that's a good way. What you just said, I'm like, that's essentially what we're going through, is like shifting to the divine feminine, like emerging, and that's part of chaos magic too. That's pussy magic. That's like, you know, women's sex organs inside of them. So like the part of you that like you can't see. And I think that the men did decide a lot of things, so they were in positions of power, and there was a more limited supply. And yeah, things are opening up, and it's really exciting. So I think that's a great way to. Yeah, it's a great way to say goodbye.
Yeah, and me personally, when I'm trying to decide if something's right or not, I do absolutely check with my womb. You know, I absolutely do. If it's like, you know, if it feels closed off and it feels like it's a sacred no, then I don't do it. And if it feels open and a yes, and it feels like it wants to welcome in whatever that is, then it's a yes. And I think that's also a good way to leave it. This has been great. If people want to buy your books, do you have a website? Do you want to direct people to your social media?
Oh yeah, I have my website is pioneersofourselves.com, and my social media is Pioneers of Ourselves, and my email is pioneersofourselves@gmail. So I encourage everybody to reach out in whatever way feels comfortable to them. And thank you so much for thank you.
You're
for
welcome.
being who you are.
And I'm Philosopher Bonnie everywhere. I'm easy to find as well. So thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Bye.
Yay us.
Yes.
Oh wait, I need glasses to figure out what button to hit.